Hey guys, it's SmoothJK here to talk about the new upcoming banner and the event real quick. Um, so this is kind of what we've expected once we heard about the new awakenings for the Final Fantasy V characters, Bartz and Gilgamesh. So this is just confirmation of what we already knew, but still exciting because the banner is actually going to be better than what we feared. So instead of Galuf and Kryl, they're actually putting two new characters on the banner along with Bartz and Exdeath, Gilgamesh and Faris. And this banner is actually going to be really good. There's really no trash units on this banner. The booby prize, I guess, would be Faris, but even she is pretty good. Let's just do a quick scan through, and then we'll talk in more detail as we usually do. The top prize in the banner, the base 5-star, aka impossible to get unless you're really lucky, is Gilgamesh. For those of you who don't know Final Fantasy V, he's kind of like a benevolent villain type. He's a really funny character, but any like Record Keeper or Brave Exvius or these kinds of games, they tend to make Gilgamesh really good because the lore around him is really rich. He's going to be mainly a physical attacker who's actually pretty versatile in his skills. His Trustmaster reward is really good. It brings your attack and magic up by 10% and enables Dual Wield. Now, what I heard about this is that it only affects normal attacks, and it doesn't actually give you the normal properties of Dual Wield, but I'm not quite sure about that. If it only affects your normal attacks, that's not the best thing in the world, although it turned out to be pretty useful for something like Maxwell, where you want to do the normal attacks, get a lot of crystals and Esper orbs. But from what I hear, it doesn't affect your skills. It affects your normal attacks. So we'll wait to see about that. The next unit is Bartz, as we've discussed before. We've had him for a while. He was one of the original Barrage users, but they're making him a lot better, and they're making him actually a lot more wind-based. So we haven't seen too many wind immune or resistant bosses yet, but that's one thing to fear. But if there aren't those resistant enemies, then his skills are going to be very useful. And people are also calling him the walking elixir, and we'll talk about that, why that is. Next unit is, again, going to be the best mage in the game for a while, Exdeath, currently a 5-star mage. He started out as the best mage, then he got taken over by mages like Kefka and Ark, but he's going to reclaim the throne for a while. And the last unit, the new unit, is Faris, who's going to be kind of a hybrid, but mainly a support character. I guess the biggest thing about her is that she's going to bring full break and focus, very much like Van. She does have a couple of other things too, and we'll discuss that again. As for the event, it's going to be pretty much the pattern we've been doing is there's a farming event like the one that's going on right now with the Brave Frontier collab. And then the week after, there's going to be one of these, exploration, clear it once challenge type of events. So that's what this is, the big bridge. Unless they're just throwing me off again. So these are the clear awards: Lapis 100, Rune Bell plus 34 attack, 1 rare summon ticket, and a Twin Lance, which is a 52 attack, doubles your normal attack hits. I guess kind of like Gilgamesh's perhaps. And then the Elite Exploration, as usual, is a Trust Moogle. It doesn't mention anything about if you have Final Fantasy V characters getting a bonus or anything like that, because it's not a farming event. So, yeah, it seems like a typical one clear, and then you're done, back to TM farming or whatnot. The prizes are actually very underwhelming in my opinion. None of these weapons seem to really stand out, and 1 summon ticket, really? I mean, that's really stingy, I think. It should at least be like 3 or something. The Twin Lance could be useful in some cases where, as I mentioned before, you'd want to hit the boss a lot and get a lot of crystals and orbs, but I mean, the attack is pretty low at this stage of the game. So kind of a curious event here. But let's go ahead and discuss the characters on the banner. All right, so the first one we'll discuss is Gilgamesh, and he again is the main prize of the banner. He brings a lot of cool abilities to the table, and he look at his weapon selection. He can literally equip everything, and he's typically like that in most games. He's very versatile. He has Dragoon abilities like jump and high jump, so any benefit that you see to using Kane, I mean, he's going to have that in spades, and he's going to have much higher attack and everything. He has some situational abilities like sleep. Wind physical damage, 2x to all enemies. That's a nice AoE. Typically, we see 1.4 for a Blade Blitz. Now we see like a 1.8 for the upgraded ones like Lunith and Lightning. But this is 2x. Again, as long as they're not resistant to wind, that's a nice AoE attack. But you get something even better here, Divider, 1.8 with ignore defense 50% to all enemies. And if that's not a typo, then that's going to be by far the best AoE physical attack that we have. It is 45 MP, but you're getting a 3.6 multiplier essentially. So even if it was a single target, that would be worth the MP. But if it's an AoE as well, then that's going to be crazy. That's a crazy good attack. Of course, he has good passives, 20% defense, 30% HP. He's always tanky, and 20% attack here. And interestingly, there's a weapon collector passive, depending on what you equip on him. Again, he has a lot of choices. He might get a 40% with a katana, 30% with a sword, and 20% with a great sword. So, you know, that kind of incentivizes certain weapons for him. Auto refresh, which is nice. Again, high jump, which is going to be a killer single target damage ability, and then try attack 3x to one enemy. And it doesn't sound like a barrage. It doesn't sound like a random type of a deal. So yeah, he has good single target attacks, and he has really good AoE. So very, very good unit here. And then his limit burst is increasing him, basically buffing himself. Not a great limit burst, especially because you're getting pretty close to these kinds of buffs anyway from Embolden or Cheer, Focus, and so forth. So very good unit. If I were able to pull him, I'd be happy, but I don't even know if I'm going to pull in this banner, honestly, because I have some of the main characters and everything filled out. Faris, the other new unit, as I mentioned, is kind of a hybrid, kind of a support mainly. The stats are pretty decent here. Oh, I forgot to mention Gilgamesh's stats. I would imagine that they're good because he always has good stats. Yeah, solid HP, attack, and defense. So pretty tanky and strong as you'd expect. Back to Faris. Pretty average, a little above average, I guess. 104 attack, 103 magic. Those are her two primary attributes. And she has a good weapon selection as well. No fear, you're never going to use that. Provoke. This is interesting because she doesn't strike me as a super tanky unit, but maybe for brand new players and, you know, don't have a lot of 5-star units, this could be useful for a while. 70%, that's a good provoke. But again, I don't consider her tank, so that's kind of strange. She does have ways to increase Esper summon damage, 10%, 20% here. I don't know if that's going to become more of a thing in the future, but so far it seems pretty useless. Attack plus 20%, magic plus 20%. As I mentioned, those are her two primary attributes. She has Blade Blitz, 1.4, oldie but a goodie. Focus, which is good, especially if you have like a Refia. Well, Cecil has Focus too, but if you happen to not have Cecil, then that would be useful. And then Full Break, which is always useful, as long as the enemy doesn't resist it too much. We went through kind of a weird period with everybody seemed to resist Full Break, but then now it's kind of making a comeback, so who knows. But if you don't have a Full Break user, Faris is actually a very solid Full Break user. I would say she's probably third best after Warrior of Light and Agrius. But if you don't have a Full Break user, she's definitely better than Ingus and those kinds of people and future Full Break users that we'll get, such as Saz. So good unit, solid unit, and she has a little bit of magic for Raga to just, you know, take care of some AoE and fire weaknesses, I guess. And her magic's decent, not great, but you know, it's not going to be one of those cases where it's completely useless to use. If you put like an enhancer on her, she might have decent attack and magic. So yeah, pretty solid all-around unit. Not elite, but can be useful for a lot of people. Bartz, as we mentioned, we'll just kind of glaze through some of the other stuff. I mean, he has typical stuff that he's always had. It is noteworthy to point out that he has Entrust, which is useful because his limit break is not that great. It's just a single target attack that's on par or maybe even worse than some of his better abilities. But he has Entrust and he has at 6 stars Tailwind, which increases limit break gauge fill rate by 150%. So he's filling up his limit break gauge really fast, and then he can give that over to his allies. So there's definitely ways that that kind of support would be useful. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to really make use of that in the Maxwell fight because he could do that for Rydia, for instance, but it could be useful going forward. Last Stand, he's already had that Barrage, as I mentioned, pretty standard. He does kind of make up for his mediocre stats finally, and I keep forgetting to show the stats. He has really good weapon selection. That might be everything, actually. Yeah, at 5 star, he never really was that good. Look at his attack. It used to be lower than 100, which meant that it actually was better to put hyper wrists on him than to put Hero's Ring. But he's still pretty mediocre at 6 star compared. This is like a really good 5 star stat. It's not a good 6 star stat. Then he has pretty decent magic, but he's kind of making up for those mediocre stats with some of his passives. He gets attack and magic by 20% when he equips a sword, which is pretty much going to be always. HP plus 20%. Then he gets this Boko pendant, which is all these passive 10%, kind of like Gumi saying, okay, we know we made him suck too much. This is just a way to boost everything. Attack plus 20, defense plus 20. So he actually turns out pretty okay with all the passives. Life Giver, this is why people call him the walking elixir, because he can completely refill a teammate. He does die, but if you have Refia who can do full life, especially if you have dual cast with her full life and then still Kiraja-ing the party, this could be very useful for drawn-out fights where you're running out of MP, like you're using Cloud of Darkness's Omni Veil, and you can refill the MP this way. So it's a nice option to have. Now, Seeker Blade is a nice starter ability. Basically, you'll do pretty good defense damage, I should say, 2.7x, and then decrease the wind resistance for 3 turns. And then after you do that, you'd want to follow up with one of these really strong wind abilities. Gale Barrage, 5 wind physical attacks, 4x to random enemies. Basically a stronger version of Barrage. So instead of 3.2, you get 4x. And wind hybrid damage, 5.4x to one enemy. This does cost more MP, but I'll be curious to see how much more it does because it is hybrid damage. And depending on how well you build up his attack and magic, that could determine whether that's better than Gale Barrage or not. And then he has Imperil like he always had. And like I mentioned, his Limit Burst is just a physical attack to one enemy. You might want to be using Entrust instead. So that's Bartz. Good attacker and definitely could be useful. And finally, we'll talk about Exdeath, who's going to be the king of the mages for a while. I'm sure you all are pretty familiar with him at 5 stars already. He's going to be, 6 stars is pretty important at this point because you need to have a mage that can actually survive hits. So he has good HP and MP for a mage, and then he has pretty good magic there. He does have minus 50 to light resistance, so that would be terrible for Maxwell, but that's not going to be a concern anymore after the Spanner comes out. And then he equips, his typical gear. I thought he had more of a more magic passives at 6 stars, but it looks like he just gets an MP passive here, which is fine. He already had that plus 30 here. So Transcender, this is interesting. Instead of like killer abilities, which are physical, this actually increases his magical damage against these types of enemies by 30%. So in a way, it's kind of like a built-in passive for magic. And this covers a broad range of enemies, obviously. It's a really cool thing that's being introduced to the game. It's basically a magic version of killer passives. Earthshaker, 1.8 to all enemies. That's basically a Stonga. So he's able to cover more elements now. The only element that he can't cover is wind, but we have plenty of wind users now. MP plus 20%, and then dual black magic. That's what's making him really, really powerful at 6 stars, especially because he can use dual Agas, or he can use dual Meteor, which is a really strong AoE, 2.5 with Ignore Spirit, 25%. He can do dual Meteor, which is insane. That's going to basically wreck an arena. That's only weaker than Ultima by 0.3. Ultima's 2.8. And it has the same properties, and it's cheaper MP-wise, so it's actually a good spell. He also has Wicked Light, which is basically the light elemental version of Ultima. Same multiplier and everything. Although, if you run up against a light-resistant enemy, that could be a problem. And this is not considered black magic or white magic. It's not considered black magic, so you can't dual cast this, but still nice to have in your arsenal. So that's the rundown of the banner. And obviously there's a lot to look forward to, and I might not pull on my main account because I already have Bartz. I already have like 3 Exdeaths, 2 Bartz actually. But for anybody who doesn't have those characters, doesn't have a full break user, Faris would be good. Doesn't have Bartz, doesn't have Exdeath, you definitely want to pull on this banner, and then you might just get Gilgamesh if you're lucky enough. So it's a very good banner. People who've been playing since the launch might not pull on this banner unless you're going for double hand. And I completely forgot to talk about the TMs. Sorry about that. Let me go back. So Faris's TM, Soldier's Protection, is not up. So let's go back to the game. All right, so what does the game tell us about it? Well, I can tell you Bartz is double hand, which basically increases the attack stats of any attack equipment. So it'll take your weapons attack and things like hyper risks and add 50% to that. It doesn't do it by your base stats, it does it by your equipment. So double hand can be useful if you don't want to equip the shield, don't have dual wield. We already talked about Gilgamesh's Genji glove. Bartz is double hand. Oh, and one thing to mention about double hand is that if the character has it innately, like Garland or something, or Demon Rain, you can actually still equip double hand as a materia and get more of the bonuses off of it, but you can't stack more than one of these materias as you could in the Japan game. Exdeath, you get Holy, the spell Holy, as a Trustmaster reward. Nice single target light damage, I guess, but not really worth like going crazy for. And the Soldier's Protection boosts physical damage to aquatic and dragon monsters, so that's like a Aquan and Dragon Killer mixed in one, so that's okay, not really amazing or anything. So anyway, that covers everything. Hope I didn't miss anything, and yeah, pull on this banner if you don't have these units already. Either way, it's a good banner overall. So, and I'm looking forward to the event and for the 6-star awakenings. And I'll talk to you guys next time something new comes out. Hope you enjoyed.